Welcome to Uncultured Truth Podcast. I'm with my special guest, Jeffrey Deskovic. Want to tell the audience a little about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a founder of a nonprofit organization, the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice. Our mission is to free wrongfully convicted people and to pursue policy changes aimed at preventing those injustices from happening in the first place. To date, we have freed 14 people. We helped pass 3 laws and another 6 as part of a national coalition group. I'm an attorney. I have a master's degree also in criminal justice. My thesis is written on wrongful conviction causes and reform. I'm an advocate. I regularly meet with elected officials in New York, Pennsylvania, and California, beyond just having a caseload of 9 wrongful conviction cases. So I regularly speak and testify at legislative hearings, engage in other forms of advocacy. And of course, I started all of that because I served 16 years in prison myself, from age 17 to 32 for a murder and rape I did not commit, that I was ultimately exonerated of through DNA testing, which, beyond establishing my innocence, simultaneously identified the actual perpetrator, who was subsequently arrested and convicted for the crime.
Yes, for life already, right?
Yeah, he was already in prison. He had a 20 to life sentence. Of course, at the time he got caught for the first murder, which is the murder in my case, he already had 13 years in, and that was for killing another person, also by strangulation.
Okay.
How did you end up killing him?
Straight line.
Was it during the sex? Was it after the sex?
Yeah, it was during and like a rage.
What did she do? I mean, you talk about the cocaine makes you aggressive, but what did she do that put you into that rage?
Nothing. Nothing at all.
Do you remember her telling you to stop? Do you remember anything? Is that because she didn't do it, or because your condition, they blocked you out? You blocked it out.
Blocked out. I guess I blocked it out. You know, she could have, probably did, more than likely.
Yeah, I noticed like a lot of laws. It's very funny. Like for example, person go to trial, they would win the case. Okay, immediately they would still be in jail, and the DA could bring up charges again and retrial him. Okay, but the opposite is it's opposite for the defendant though. If the defendant is found guilty, like he got to get permission.
Yeah, I understand what you're getting at. I mean, look, if someone is arrested but they're found not guilty, then they definitely could not be tried again, at least not in state court. I mean, they could, theoretically, the feds could come in and, charge you federally, a civil rights violation, but the state could not retry if you're acquitted. But if they dismiss the charges, then certainly they could bring back the charges at any point. You are correct in that. But I think that the point what you're making is beyond that. If defendant is convicted, yeah, it is hard to get exonerated. I mean, you do have the first appeal as a matter of right, but then after that, you have to ask for permission from the state's highest court. Can then file in federal court. Everyone has a right to that. But then after that, everything becomes an appeal by permission after that. I mean, trying to go to the Federal Court of Appeals, it's by permission. You want to try to re-argue, that's by permission. Certainly going to the U.S. Supreme Court, that's also by permission. So yeah, that's definitely one of what I suspect will be, quite a few uncomfortable truths that we cover today.
Yes, I noticed. I don't know if you're familiar with rappers. We got YEW Melly. I think it was like a hung jury. I think it was a hung jury, and now
Yeah,
they retrialing him again, and like I feel that's like a loophole for the government to actually get somebody to go to jail. Wrong that the government able to do that to somebody.
right, but an acquittal, though, yeah, they couldn't if you were acquitted unless they bring a charge in federal court. That would be double jeopardy. You're right, but a hung jury is not considered to be an acquittal. So a verdict has to be unanimous. That means all the people on the jury have to either vote not guilty or they all have to vote guilty. But if you have a end result where the verdict is not unanimous, then that's considered to be a mistrial, and that's how they're able to charge you. Yeah.
So if it keep going to a mistrial, can they keep charging you again and again?
They
Or
can keep,
or is a limit?
they can, no, they can keep retrying you. Yeah, it's not that they're
Crazy.
charging you again, it's just that they're retrying you. But yes, there is no limit to that until there's a unanimous verdict one way or the other, which, I mean, by the time you get to like, I mean, honestly, if there's a mistrial after one trial, I mean, there really should be a really long look at, what the case actually is against the defendant, what's the quality of the evidence, are they really able to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt? Because obviously the jury didn't think so, and I think a lot more thought needs to go into whether, to, retry somebody, after there is a mistrial.
Yes, that's so true. I see it's a show on Oxygen. And it's about cold cases, and I noticed it was one of the cases lady handled, and the person was found guilty. He went to jail. He appealed. He got a retrial. In the second trial, he was found now guilty, and all the evidence led to the stepfather or the father. I don't know if it's stepfather's. I'm gonna put it as the B-roll. You watch the video yourself, you can see what I'm talking about.
Sure.
And like the DA is like, I'm not charging the father because we know he didn't do it. We know it was him. It's not, no matter what the evidence show, we know it was him. I'm like, that's so biased. It's so biased.
It is. That's called that's called tunnel vision. That's when, when a conclusion is formed, and then after that, people, ignore any evidence to the contrary. They just hold, they can only see things, one way. Yeah. But definitely, by the standard of the National Registry of Exonerations, if someone has their conviction reversed and then they go back to trial and they're acquitted, then that's considered to be an exoneration. And, it is a troubling trend, prosecutors not, accepting results and making statements similar to, oh, well, we still think that, defendant was guilty. I mean, just imagine just keeping a cloud of suspicion over somebody's head like that, and that's really, damaging externally, and then even just psychologically, if you're wronged like that, and you were, arrested and wrongfully convicted, and you spend time in prison unjustly, and then when you finally are able to get justice, to then have it kind of like denied justice in a way by their saying, yeah, we still think he's guilty, or look, we're not dismissing because him or her they are innocent, but it's just that so many years have passed by, or our witnesses' memories have faded, we can't find the witness, so 15 years ago a jury of his or her peers found them guilty, so we still think that they're guilty. I mean, that really is a really damaging psychological thing.
Yes. And why the police don't listen to the people that they want to arrest? Like, for example, I'm gonna give you a perfect example. A person could make a complaint about somebody. Make a complaint, the cops will go to the person's house and be like, hey, such and such, we got a complaint against you. Okay. Put your hands behind your back, and they arrest you immediately. Take you to the precinct. They either like call Albany and give you a DAT, or if you got a warrant, you're going straight to the system. Like, it's Albany say no to DAT, you're going straight to the system, and then you'll see the judge. The judge going to either R you, or he'll give you a bail. This happened to me plenty of times. I've never been convicted of a crime, but I've been arrested plenty of times. I've been on trial plenty of times. Cases always got dismissed. I always found that was wrong. Like, why they just don't ask questions? Like, why not come? I'm gonna give you a perfect example of give you a perfect case. Perfect case. I was working for a dog daycare. It was a very, very big pop-up dog daycare that was bought out by American Kennel Club. And I quit the job because they wanted me to sign documents over somebody else's sexual harassment. Basically, the guy was telling a story to a girl in the room where I was in. And I asked the girl, was she comfortable with the story? She said yes, she had no problem with it. So I went about my business. Like, if the person look at the camera, you see I never was interacting with them. It's the only time that's the only time I ever said something to the girl and the guy. And I was the supervisor too. So I let the conversation go. So a couple of days go past, and now it's like a Monday. And the supervisor, the director comes to me. He's like, hey, I need you to sign this paperwork for sexual harassment. I said, wait, I didn't sexual harass nobody. He said, no, you was in a room where the conversation was being told and you didn't report it. I said, it's not my business to report it. He said, you're a supervisor. Like, even though the girl said she was comfortable with the conversation, you supposed to have written it up. So I'm like, no, I'm not signing that. I took my shirt off. I threw it at him. And I walked out. So I go get my paycheck. My paycheck only got like 2 days on it instead of the whole 2 weeks that I worked. So I'm like, yo, I need my money, this and that, this and that. Give me a check now. Write me a check now. They wouldn't do it. So I ended up leaving. But I guess me asking for my money now, it was like aggression. Angry black man. So I got a phone call. I don't know from who. I think it's from somebody because they just sold the company to American Kennel Club. So I think it was somebody on that end. So he's like, hey, we're gonna express mail you a check. You have it tomorrow. Like you have it tomorrow express. Like I said, cool, no problem. Just make sure all my money is on the check. Hangs up the phone. They calls back about 20 times because I guess they was mad because I hung up the phone on them. My roommate at the time grabs the phone and says, "Y'all better stop doing that if I come up there with my ding, that, threatening violence." So he hung. Then I hung up the phone. I said, "Yo, why did you do that, man?" I said, "Now they gonna call the cops now." I said, "Now they gonna come looking for me now." They, "No, you're not. Just that. That's my voice, isn't that? It's that." So I goes to the So one day I get a phone call from a detective. He like, "Hey, can you come in? This and that, and that." I'm like, "Look, I don't know." I'm like, "Look, I'm not threatening nobody. This and that." I'm like, "You hear my voice now?" If they recorded that conversation, I said, "You hear that's not my voice. It's not my voice. That voice is very deeper than mine." He's like, "Oh, let's just come in and talk to me." Such a. I go to talk with the guy. He's like, "Okay, such a. They say it's your voice." I said, "Did you hear the tape?" He said, "Yes, her tape." I said, "Do it sound like my voice?" He said, "No, it don't." I said, "Okay, then, because it's not my voice. It's not my voice." I said, I also had a letter, a notarized letter from the guy that actually said it. As I said it, his name, his phone number, his address, everything. And I gave it to the cop. He still in that. They arrested me. I spent 3 days. I spent 2 days in jail until I saw a judge. The judge honored me, and I went home. That case went to trial. The case went to trial. The people never showed up, but the location of the dog taker was 2 blocks away from the courtroom. Literally 2 blocks away from the courtroom. They could easily walk up the block to the courtroom and spoke, but they didn't. So I ended up spending 2 days in jail and ended up spending 6 months on trial for a case that had nothing to do with me at all. It had something to do with me, but not a crime I didn't commit, or a threat I didn't commit. And I feel like that's so wrong. It happens to me plenty of times. Cops come to the door. We got a complaint against you. Put your hands behind your back. I go to Central Bookings. I sit in Central Bookings for a day or two. The judge R&R me. I go home or go to trial. Person don't come to trial. Either person don't come to court, or the person do come to court, and I end up still getting released, or the cases getting dismissed because the person information is not correct. I had to just split it to the thing. Like one time, it said that I was being violent like crazy, and I wasn't even in the state. I was living in Jersey at the time. And the person said I did so much stuff. I'm like, Your Honor, I was in Jersey. I gave my pay stubs. I gave my address. I gave the judge all list, and they end up dismissing the case. And I feel like it's wrong for a cop to come to your door, say they come and made a complaint against you, and put your handcuffs on you and take you to jail instead of asking you questions like how you see on TV, for example.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, officers are supposed to investigate, but a lot of times, they just take the word of whoever it is that called them, or the first person that they speak to, instead of, hearing from both sides, trying to do investigation, seeing, is there a camera? Are there other people taking into account what they're saying? You're right. That does happen. That does happen, a lot.
Yeah, I'm not for rambling. Like I really, this interview is like really like getting my blood boiling, because all the crookedness in the legal system.
Sure. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, look, there's, prosecutorial misconduct is a factor that runs through a lot of wrongful conviction cases. Certainly, coerced false confessions, which involve the police coercing people, which, can involve threats and false promise, misidentification, which has caused wrongful conviction in like 71% of the cases. I mean, sometimes the lineups or photo arrays that the officers conduct, they're unfairly suggestive. And even sometimes where, the police, they got their snitches that they work with, and they convey what it is they want the informants to say. And the informants will pick up on that, and then they'll just say what the cops want, regardless of whether they really, actually have knowledge of something they actually saw, heard something. They'll just make something up in order to get, benefit. But, you know, from 1989 forward, I mean, per the National Registry of Exonerations, there's been 3,418, you know, exonerations across the U.S. So
Mhm.
that's a lot of false, it's a lot of false allegations. That's a lot of wrongful convictions.
Mhm.
And that's just really the people, that's just those of us that have made it out.
Mhm. You're so right about that. Your case, like, how
Mhm.
did that start? Like,
Mhm.
what happened?
Sure.
When,
So the year was 1989. It's in Peekskill, which is in Westchester County, New York. It's the suburbs. I would describe Peekskill as it was definitely ethnically diverse and kind of like a middle income type of city. So this girl that I barely knew, her name was Angela Correa. She was in two of my classes as a freshman, one as a sophomore. I knew her name, she knew mine. That was really that was really the extent of it. We weren't even really on a high by basis. She went missing one day and her body was found a couple of days later, naked from the waist down. You know, Peekskill hadn't had very many murders, and so it created an atmosphere of fear, rumor, paranoia. You know, parents were driving their kids right to school, picking them up immediately after school. I got on the police radar because in high school I was quiet. I was to myself. I didn't really fit in. The kids were all like a year older than me. I had skipped first grade actually, and that kind of caught up to me in high school because I really wasn't into drinking or parties or or chasing girls or playing organized sports. So I didn't quite, and plus those kids were different than the kids that I used to play with in the apartment complex that I grew up in. So really, they didn't know me, and I didn't really know them. So in the course of the police investigation, they interviewed a lot of the students from the high school. Some of the kids told the police that they might want to speak with me because I didn't quite fit in. So that's how I got on their radar. Beyond that, I was a sensitive teenager. This was really my first brush with death, and I had an emotional reaction. And the cops thought, well, you barely knew the victim, so we don't get why you're emotional. I mean, they interpreted that as some sort of outward sign, like I was
guilty.
sorry for what I did. Yeah, exactly. Which doesn't make sense because in a larger context, that really shook up the whole city. I mean, to the point that free mental health services were offered to anyone who wanted it.
Mhm.
Then they got a psychological profile from the New York City Police Department, which claimed to have the psychological characteristics of the actual perpetrator. And I had the misfortune of matching that, so that was a reinforcing factor. So for about 6 weeks, the police played this cat and mouse game with me in which half the time they talk to me like I'm a suspect. And when they would push too hard and I'd become frightened and I want to get away from them, they would switch it up. And, Jeff is this junior detective helper
Mhm.
theme was developed. They would pretend they'd play like they needed my help to solve the crime when in actuality, they really were targeting me. But I
Mhm.
didn't really understand what was going on because I was just 16. And, before I was a teenager, I wanted to be a cop when I grew up.
Mhm.
So I thought I was doing some like police work because they were telling me that, um, the kids aren't going to talk around us, but they will around you. Let us know if you hear anything. Stop in from time to time. They would ask like opinion questions and congratulate me that my opinion was correct.
Mhm.
And never, my dad was never in my life, came from a single parent household. So the cops played on that. They did the good cop, bad cop tactic. And, I began to look up to the officer who was pretending to be my friend as a father figure.
Mhm.
So eventually they said, look, we got some new information that we want to share with you. And that's going to allow you to be more helpful to us. First, we want you to take and pass a lie detector test. So the next day, rather than report to school, I went to the police station for the test. My mother and grandmother thought I was in school, so they didn't call around looking for me. But they drove me from Peekskill, which is in Westchester County. They drove me 40 minutes away to the town of Brewster, which was in Putnam County. So now I can't leave anymore. I'm totally dependent upon the police. They still continue to play games. They put me in the car by myself with the officer was pretending to be my friend. They had the other two cops in a different car. And when we got there, the polygraphist was a Putnam County Sheriff's investigator, but he was dressed like a civilian. He never identified himself as a cop. He never read me my rights. I never had any idea he was law enforcement. I had no attorney present. They didn't give me anything to eat. They gave me a 4-page brochure which explained how the polygraph worked, but it had a lot of big words in it that I didn't understand. But then I figured, well, I'm there to help the cops, so what does it matter? Let's just get on with it. And from there, he put me in a small room. He gave me countless cups of coffee to get me all wired up. And then he literally wired me up by attaching me to the polygraph. And then he launched into his third-degree tactics. So he invaded my personal space. He raised his voice at me. He kept asking me the same questions over and over again. And he kept that up for 6.5 to 7 hours. As each hour passed by, my fear increased in proportion to the time. And then towards the end, he said, what do you mean you didn't do it? You just told me through the test results that you did. We just want you to verbally confirm it. And when he said that to me, that really shot my fear through the roof. And at that point, the officer who had been pretending to be my friend, he came in the room and said, look, they're going to harm you. I've been holding them off. I can't do this any longer. You got to help yourself. Then he said, just tell them what they want to hear. You can go home afterwards. You're not going to be arrested. So being young, naive, frightened, 16 years old, I wasn't thinking about the long term. I was just concerned with my safety in the moment. I was in fear of my life because the fact that I didn't know where I was and no one else knew where I was either loomed large in my mind. Then on one hand, the threat, on the other hand, this false life preserver. So I took the out which he offered and I made up a story based on the information which he gave me in the course of the interrogation. By the time it was all said and done, I had collapsed on the floor in a fetal position, crying uncontrollably. Obviously I was arrested. I was charged with the murder and rape. Maybe the last point I want to quickly make is that this interrogation was not videotaped. It was not audio taped. There was no signed statements. It was just the cop's word. And later on, when they came to court, they left the threat and false promise out their story. And so that was how I came to be arrested for a murder and rape that I did not commit.
So many violations they committed. So many. Like, they basically kidnapped you too. Took you to a whole nother town. Like, basically kidnapped you. Like,
yeah.
They committed crimes themselves. What happened to the officers?
Short answer, nothing.
So
Nothing happened to them, and, they got a lot of credit for solving the case, and, dudes got promotions, and, the lieutenant that oversaw all that became the police chief based in part on my case. Before we went to trial, you said you went to trial on a lot of your matters. Before I went to trial, the results of a DNA test came in, and it showed that semen found in the victim didn't match me. But instead of dropping the case and refocus investigation, they kept going. They got the medical examiner to commit fraud, to commit perjury. When they do an autopsy, they do the written notes and audio with the recorder. They do all that when they make the findings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only 6 months after doing the autopsy. Once the DNA didn't match me, this medical examiner suddenly said that he remembered. Try to follow this now. This is going to get tricky. It's going to make no sense. He says, I remember that I forgot to document medical evidence that he claimed showed that the victim had been promiscuous, which is what opened the door for the prosecutor to argue, well, that was how the DNA didn't match you. She was sleeping around. She slept around with someone before you murdered and raped her. Then he took it a step further and mentioned somebody by name that he claimed that she slept with. But he never tried to prove that. Like, he never called him as a witness. He never got a DNA sample. He just made the unsupported argument. He just threw the suggestion in the air. And he got away with that because my lawyer let him get away with that. I mean, first, the victim's family wasn't coming to court, so they didn't know what was being said about her in the courtroom, and the furtherance of trying to wrongfully convict me. But more importantly, my lawyer let him get away with it. I mean, he never cross-examined the medical examiner. He stood up in court and said, you're going to be pleased to know that I don't have a single question for you. He never, you imagine? Yeah, he said, and then he said, you want to comment on that before I mention the other things, or? All right, so so the other thing, I'll round out what else happened at trial. So he never explained the DNA not matching me. He never used that to argue that that proved the confession was coerced and false. He rarely met with me. When he did meet with me, I tried to explain to him what happened in the interrogation room. He was always shutting me up. One time he said, I don't care if you're guilty or innocent. My lawyer should have never represented me because of a conflict of interest. So that other youth that the prosecutor was falsely saying had slept with the victim was represented by another member of that public defender office, and specifically by the lawyer that was supposed to be supervising him on my case. And so that conflict prevented the defense from asking him for a DNA sample. That prevented the defense from calling him as a witness. And lastly, he wouldn't let me testify. He said it wasn't up to him to prove I was innocent. It was up to the prosecution to prove that I was guilty. You know that that's a very naive way to practice law, especially in a confession case. You got to attack the confession. You got to explain it. You got to disprove it, bring it all together in your closing argument, or you're probably going to lose the trial. I mean, the jury hears you confess that's game, set, and match unless you do something dramatic, right? But he didn't do any of that. Sometimes he argued to the jury the confession never happened. Sometimes he told the jury it did happen, but I was coerced, and sometimes he argued that the confession was false. So by taking this approach of just throwing stuff against the wall and hoping something stuck, he had to have been standing there with no credibility. The judge repeatedly allowed the polygraphist to tell the jury that I failed when I failed the polygraph, even though the polygraph is not scientific. It produces false results, and that's very prejudicial. But he let the polygraphist repeatedly tell the jury that I failed the polygraph when I denied committing the crime. So it really wasn't a fair trial, man. And the end result of it all was I was found guilty of a murder and rape I didn't commit. I had been charged as an adult, so I had been sentenced as an adult. And I was given a 15 to life sentence, with the judge sentencing me, even though he told me maybe you are innocent. And I was sent to a men's maximum security prison as a 17-year-old with 15 to life sentence.
You were 17 when you got convicted. You
Right.
you were 16 when you was arrested, right?
Right.
So that means if you skipped a grade, that means the girl had to be about 15, 14 years old, right?
15 years old. Yes, correct. You did the
So
math.
how come they assumed that she
Promiscuous?
Yes.
I don't think they really thought that. I think that was just the excuse that he came up with once the DNA didn't match me. Because I'll tell you why I say that, because when the DNA didn't match me, I learned this many, many years later during the lawsuit. But when the DNA didn't match me, the police went in the field. They interviewed like 17 people that knew the victim in different capacities. All of them told the cops, she doesn't have no boyfriend. There is no consensual sex. But the cops did not document any of those witness interviews. And therefore, they were not turned over to the defense. We never knew that any of that happened. We could have made use of that if we had known. So that was why I say I don't think that they really thought she was promiscuous, because everybody they interviewed told them to the contrary, but they kept going with everything anyway, just because that was the way that they wanted everything to be, so that they could try to get a conviction.
Yeah, because it's 1989. I doubt it would be like a lot of young people out there doing stuff like that. Like usually when girls are promiscuous at that young age, it was because of trauma. They was molested. It was R words or M words, something like that. So now it's like in them. Like I didn't lose my virginity till I was like 17. Like, and I didn't care for none of that stuff. I didn't care about kissing girls or doing stuff with girls and like that. It wasn't in my head until I got older, and my puberty, started like hormones.
And your hormones were kicking in. Right, exactly.
Started going on. But most 15, 14-year-old girls, they're not thinking about that stuff.
Right, exactly. I mean, look, this girl, I learned years later, I mean, as I understood it, the girl was leading a very sheltered life. She never went anywhere unless she was accompanied by her parents or her older sister. They knew that she wasn't sleeping around. It's just they They just wanted to come up with a story so that they could try to have me found guilty, so that it could appear as though that, they did their job and that life could go back to normal. The public pressure to solve the crime and to get a conviction would disappear.
How do you feel about the criminal system now?
Well, I know that it's broken. There's many cracks in the system that allow people to, innocent people to be arrested for crimes that they didn't commit. I mean, we talked about some of that stuff before, with prosecutorial misconduct, false confessions, misidentification, lying informants, junk science. We talked about tunnel vision as well. And that stuff can happen now just as easy as it could before. I mean, I think that, many of us, we look, well, we think we're, as a society, we're advanced now. That couldn't happen today. And we think about DNA, but DNA is only around in like 10% of all, serious felony cases. I know that there's racial bias built into the justice system. I remember reading some stats, black person 7 times more likely to be wrongfully convicted of murder, 3.5 times more likely to be convicted of, a sex offense. So it's definitely broken. At the same time, I try to be balanced. I mean, I don't think all the cops are bad. I don't think all the prosecutors are bad. I reject the idea that it's a few bad apples, like they always like to say. It's a hell of a lot more than that. I mean, we wouldn't have the brutality and unjustifiable deadly police force. We wouldn't have the 3,518, exonerations from 89 forward. But it's not everybody. It's not everybody either. I just want some accountability. I want some improvement in the system. When I went to prison, I mean, I went to a men's maximum security prison. I mean, could you imagine a 17-year-old white boy going to men's maximum security prison for a rape case? If it would just been murder, it would have been cool. But if it was the murder and the rape, that's suddenly the whole vigilante mentality was people convicted of sex offenses, man.
Yeah, I know people that went to jail. I never been convicted myself. I've been to Church of Bookings. That's the farthest I've ever went. I've never been to Rikers. I've never been upstate or nothing like that. But I know people that has been, and they either come out passive or they come out very aggressive. As the passive ones, like they would come home and they would cry on their mother lap. And I actually seen that for myself. Like, a grown man, 6 feet tall, come home and cry on his aunt's lap, about what happened to him in jail. But I also got people that come home that's toughest son of the bees that you ever would meet. Don't say nothing bad to them. They will punch you in your face immediately. Violence is not a problem. Actually, they become more violent than they was when they first went in. You think about it.
Yeah, I absolutely. I agree with both your observations. I mean, in prison, prison was very violent. A spot where they sent me to, Elmira, had the reputation, junior gladiator school. Had 3 or 4 stabbings or cuttings every day. They had a lot of violence that didn't involve weapons. There was gang activity, so there was a general environment of violence that permeated the air. A lot of the correction officers, they really weren't professional. They come to work and they, take their frustrations of their personal life out on the prisoners. Some of them are literally walk the opposite direction and you look the other way when something violent was happening because they didn't want to have to break things up or file paperwork afterwards. So prison was difficult, man. There was times I was beat up. One time I nearly lost my life. It was a very frightening experience, but yet I had to survive. I had to adapt. I had to toughen up, and I had to take it as things come. But the most important thing, as I'm sure you've heard, it's win, lose, or draw. You got to go for yours, man. Someone tries to take something, you can't let anybody take even just a pen from you. Nothing. You got to fight. You got to defend. You got to protect. You got to hold on, man. And it don't matter. You get your rear end whipped. The main thing is you fought. You get that respect. But if you don't, then there's going to be a lot more problems than what you think you just now avoided. So it was really a difficult thing. I had to fight off feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, thoughts of giving up. And time I thought about suicide. Prison was very lonely, man. Elmira was like 4.5 hours away from Peekskill. So, my mother came, she would come like, once a month. But in the last 5, 6 years, I saw her like once every 6 months. I had a couple of sets of aunts and uncles that would come visit, and then they would disappear for 3 years. So really, I saw them maybe 3 to 5 times throughout the bid. My brother, who's 3.5 years younger than I am, he came 3 times in the 16 years. Not at all in the last decade. Grandma passed away while I was in prison. So, for most intents and purposes, I mostly did the time on my own. So it was a lonely thing. Also, it was hard all the way across the board, man.
So you didn't have like care packages or nothing like that, commissary or nothing like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I first started out, yeah, my mother would send a care package, right? That is the phrase, by the way. And she would send money, and I'd go to commissary. Yeah, but I'm saying the last 5 or 6 years, I mean, things got tougher for her financially, and I just had to live off the land. So I had to start, you know,
Bartering.
that's bartering and hustling. I was working in food service, so I would sneak food back to myself from the mess hall, and other people coming through the line would want extra food, and you set contracts up, and I want this and this and this extra, and I got to try to assess the security and try to figure out how I can get pass off to people over the line and try not to get caught, and making my deals. Yeah, you give me, I want a toothpaste, and give me deodorant. I need 4 or 5 stamps, whatever those are some of the items. But I had to try to make it on my own, man. Even just working in food service was a move to try to make it on my own, because they make better pay. There went from like $8 every 2 weeks to making $20 every 2 weeks, and then I did the food service test, and I went to like $25, and after 3 years they gave me a raise. I eventually got to I was the clerk, man. That was kind of like a combination of being a manager and a CEO wrapped up into one. So I had 2 computers. Check this out, man. I had 2 computers. I had to keep physical and computer records on our inventory, reorder the supplies, make sure that everyone that was due for a raise got it, make sure that if people worked overtime, they got that, put people in for their certificates. I had to make sure there was enough workers, keep the security happy, and print out menus. If I made a mistake, it would throw something else off. But after doing that for a few months, they gave me. I got another raise, man. I got to 42 cents an hour, man.
42 cents. They go 42 cents.
Yeah, there was only like 4 slots in the whole prison. The whole prison had there was an aggregate of 42 cent slots. So yeah, but I tried to. My way of doing it was I would try to keep everybody happy, and I started discovering that dudes was being shorted when they would work overtime. They was being shorted, and my boss, a civilian, he said, "Oh, don't go looking for it. I mean, look, it's one thing if people come to you and bring the issue, but I don't want you, going through records and trying to find it on your own." I said, "Yeah, sure." I just tell them that, but I would bust out all my work in like 2.5 days for the whole week, and then I would look for I would look for when people was owed money anyway, and I try to keep everybody happy. That was my way of navigating. I used to put stuff in, and back pay, and listen, man, if this dude comes and asks you, did you bring this to me? Did you bring it to me? Did I bring it to you? You can't give me up, man. I'm taking a chance, even making sure you try to, get paid what you're supposed to get. So, but it was some interesting days in there, man. It was, we made the best of it. I played chess. You try to keep a light heart. You try to laugh at as many things as you can, because you're in hell all day, man. Who the hell wants to be there? So if we can chuckle for a couple seconds, even if it's just a second, man, that's vital. That's vital. That's vital to survival.
I got 2 questions. My first question is about Elmira. What do they make in there? I work at hospitality, and we use soap that's made in jail.
Yeah, core craft.
Yeah.
So Elmira So at Elmira, so they did make the soap, the core craft, and then also they would make license plates,
Okay.
and they would also they had industry, outside industry that had some kind of jail, had some kind of contract with the prison in the state. But bottom line is that the industry shop was set up over there, and again, you'd make more money if you work there. But they was making manhole covers, excuse me,
Yeah.
manhole covers.
Heard about those.
Yeah, and they also had like print shops, so they would print up they would print up different jobs, and and it's crazy. They had like quality control. They had everyone, all these different prisoners doing different functions, and if the end product was printed and there was a mistake, they would go and take everybody's bonus. They would take everybody's bonus from that. So those are the things that they made.
What about the women? What about the female CEOs? You didn't see no craziness with the female CEOs?
So I saw it in a metaphorical sense. Like I heard about it, like I never like physically saw it with my eyes, and I was never I was never fortunate enough to be involved in dalliance. Okay, not to say that I wouldn't have. I would have jumped at the chance. I'm gonna keep 100 here, because there ain't nothing else. I mean, they have the family reunion program. They call it FRP. Trailer visits.
Yeah.
Which there's trailers located on the prison grounds, and your visitor could come up, like say on a Friday morning, they bring food there, and you go on the visit around 10 o'clock in the morning, and you stay there all the way until like Sunday morning around like 8 o'clock. But you gotta be married for that, unless you're gonna get a family trailer, like your mom or family members. But they wanted me to take and pass a sex offender training program, you know, uh, and before they would let me go out there, even just on a family trail. I mean, I was never married or anything like that, or I never had a girl or anything like that either. I mean, I think that the charge kind of, got in the way of that. I mean, I would advertise, I'd put ads. We're getting into some stuff I don't normally get a chance to talk to, by the way. So I'm kind of happy about that. But dudes was getting girls. I mean, they would listen, they were like Friends Beyond the Wall and different paid websites. This is when, personals on the internet was like a new thing. And places would charge you like $25 or $40, and you send some pictures, you write your bio, and they send it, and then they take a screenshot and print it and send it back to you. That's how you know that you actually got the service that you offered for. And and then they had just written personal, so people was doing all types of stuff like that. And and of course, if you and I were cool and you had a female visitor, and did your girl have a friend, or or anything you could imagine, any kind of way that you could imagine that you could come in contact with a female with the idea of trying to get a visit and ultimately have some kind of relationship going. I mean, dudes was doing. I limited myself to just trying, some ads and websites and stuff, but nobody, I never got like a response back. And I think that what was happening, my theory, which I can't prove, but just my theory, was that I thought that people they would look at my ads, and then maybe they would look up. There's a different Department of Corrections has a website, so they would look up like what I was locked up for.
Yeah.
And me claiming in my ad that I was innocent, that wasn't all that persuasive. You know what I mean? So I never actually got, to have a girl or anything. But my point is, they had the trailers and all of that stuff. But but going back to, you asked about female CEOs. Yeah, I mean, there was so the wildest story. So I've heard, like, there was a female officer, and sometimes when people would go out to recreation was always optional. And the evening rec was always optional. So I had heard that there was somebody once that while everybody normal wanted to get out the cage and go to the rec area, play some basketball, play cards, play chess, work out, sports, shower, phone, whatever. While everyone else with sense was going to wreck. Some people, you know, somebody was staying back, and this female CO would open up. There's like a thing. It looks like a cell, but it's got like a big sink. And it's got like cleaning supplies, like, you know, mops, mop bucket, big bucket to put water in because, you know, pass out, all the cleaning stuff. And they call that the slop sink. You know, I still don't know why they call it the slop sink. I mean, I guess it has something to do with the slop, the dirt. I mean, that's maybe the theory. But to not rant, which I'm doing anyway. She was letting this dude out, and, you know, he would go in the slop sink with her, and, you know, they would do the thing. I heard of that. And, you know, I certainly heard there was female nurses that were working the overnight shift, and there was like a porter, which is a janitor, and you know, they would do things in the nighttime. But the one of the wildest things, so there's two wild things. So this female CO, she was very overweight. Let's just say that. And I think I don't understand what she was thinking. I think she forgot herself and forgot security and everything, but she was off, and she came to the prison as a visitor, the same prison that she worked at. And she came to see some dude. So she, you know, so as you might imagine, she got written up and locked out of the jail. So that was kind of a wild story that I heard. Maybe one other thing is that this other female, she got caught fooling around with somebody, and the end result of it is, so she not only got locked out, she got fired. Right? It is a theory of rape in New York. You can't have sex with a prisoner. The theory is that, you know, you're at a power imbalance, that somebody can't consent. So she got charged with rape also. And beyond that, her husband divorced her also. Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, I hear stories like that all the time in there.
And I was never fortunate enough to be involved, man.
What about people from the community coming in there, like somebody that looked like a girl going inside the men jail?
Yeah, I saw stuff like that. Like I said, people would come up, and from ads that people would place, they come to see. And then there were actually some local women, like in Elmira, that lived in the city of Elmira, and they would come up to see people. And one time there was a guy named Sunday, actually, because, you know, prison people have, you know, prison handle. This guy's name was he went by the prison name of Sunday. And this girl came to see Sunday a couple of years, you know, for a couple of years. And when he got transferred to another prison that was 3 hours away, like the week after that, she suddenly came up on a visit, and she was visiting somebody else, man. So we saw that, and I've heard bizarre lines of reasoning, you know, guys, you know, people would talk, you know, and you know, my girl's theory is that, you know, she would prefer to deal with someone who's locked up, because that way I don't need to wonder about, you know, what you're doing at night. I know exactly what you're doing. You in the damn prison locked up. You're not fooling around. So I mean, I've heard, you know, stories like that. I mean, yo, listen to this though, man. This was crazy. One time I heard, and actually I knew the people. We were, you know, all in college together, and back when there was college and in prison. But yo, this guy hooked up this dude with his mother.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that was crazy. And so she would drive the distance to get to the prison, and she would, whenever she'd come for 2 days. You know, one day she's gonna visit with one guy, sleep over in the hotel, and the next day, you know, come see the son. So when they let the guy out, right, not the one whose mother it was, but the other, he would be I would hear them. They would be on like the floor above me, the gallery above me, and he'd be walking, and he'd stop in front of they'd stop in front of the son's cell, and yeah, she's here. I'm going down to see her. You want me to ask her anything? You want me to say anything to her for you? And you know, it was yeah. That was crazy. Yeah, because you imagine mom's one of your friends. I mean, that's bizarre enough in and of itself, you know. I
Mhm.
mean, just the fact that it's your friend, that's your mom, you know, obviously inherently there's going to be a significant,
Mhm.
you know, age difference. But then you want to add the additional twist of you know, you know, you're introducing your mother to someone else who's incarcerated, man. It's it's reckless,
Yeah.
like your like your shirt says. It's reckless.
Yes. Yeah.
It's
I,
reckless.
I never seen nothing like that. But I seen people friends with their mama. Like for example, my brother messed with a lady that lived downstairs under us, and we was very cool with her son, very cool. But she was a drug addict. She was at first she was like just doing like cocaine and stuff like that. But like she started hanging out with the other drug addicts in the neighborhood, and she'd be like, "Oh, go give me 3 cokes and get you 3 cracks," and they would get all crack. Now she a crackhead now. you know,
Oh wow.
and she ended up dying eventually over this and all that. But before she was never like that. Very healthy, thick woman, beautiful woman. She did. She know her nose, but very beautiful woman. My brother messed with her. Her son was cool, that, and my brother would be in the house with with his mother, and in the other days they be outside hanging out, smoking weed together.
Wow.
It's just how it was in the neighborhood.
Right.
But my question was to you, was about prisoners. Like, for
Yeah.
example, my cousin frequent jail a lot, and he told me a story about one day he was sitting there. He did the intake, so he was there when the person come in intake,
Yeah,
and
sure.
it was a man that looked just like a female. Like he said he couldn't tell that it wasn't a female. He said he knew it wasn't a female because with jail she was in, with jail he was in, she whatever you want to call it was in, but you couldn't tell. And he said you see them running around, but you see like the ODers, like ones that had like life in prison and stuff like that, already been there for 20 years, stuff like that. They started messing with that person. My cousin he didn't see what happened, but when he walked past the cell, one guy was blocking the cell, and the person was sitting on the thing next to the other man. And then there was another scene where when the person first came into the jail, the man that she was sitting next to came with a large, big towel, real hard towel, like a bad, like a beach towel, and gave it to the person to take a shower. Give him that soap and all that, take a shower, that. And I'm like, that story was like so crazy to me. I'm like, so I'm like, let me ask you the question, like, you ever see something like that happen to you? Having like that inside the thing.
Well, that never happened to me, but yeah, I
No,
did.
no, not to you, but like, you see
Right.
anything like that inside the
Yeah,
jail?
I did. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I've seen people messing around with homosexuals in
Yeah.
jail. Yeah, I did see that. There was there was one. I remember there was one guy that people used to call him Lexus, and you know, Lexus would go on a visit. Lexus had a beautiful girl that was coming up to see him on the visiting room,
Mm-hmm.
and yet in the prison, I mean, yeah, but even in the way that he was dressing and mannerisms, even in the visiting room, like he was exhibiting, like he was imitating female characteristics, and
Mm-hmm.
he they use Kool-Aid to try to, just a Kool-Aid mix to try to simulate instead of lipstick to try to turn the turn the lips a different color. And
Mm-hmm.
so I saw that, and there were even a few men that I don't know what the behind the scenes of it was, but they were given some sort of female hormone, so they grew
Group
like
parts.
they grew a bust. Yeah, it was kind of bizarre to me. I mean, nothing in my background ever prepared me for that. And there was, but the dudes would sometimes get in conflicts with other dudes, like over them, like if that was somebody's girl or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. But look, I don't want people to get the wrong idea either. All this is true what I'm saying, but at the
Yeah.
same time, this is not like a rampant everyday thing. This is just like a minority of people that were, engaging in
Yeah.
and doing that. But I personally, I mean, I always when it comes to the shower, it's a group shower. It's a lot of shower heads. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of think like a locker room,
Yeah.
like a sports locker room scenario, not individual showers with just a whole lot of shower heads and everything. So You know, I always showered with my underwears on. You know, most people with self-respect would do that. You try to maintain some kind of sense of privacy. You take your soap and you reach in and you clean areas that you have to be cleaned. But whenever I saw that, you know, I know that, you know, somebody that was homosexual was in the shower. I mean, I like waited for them to come out the
Yeah.
shower before I, you know, went in there
Yeah.
to shower.
Yeah, that's what my cousin told me. He said it's not like that up there. He said West Coast, yes, down south, yes. He's like, but in New York, it's a choice. People choose to do that kind of stuff, but it's not people trying to like attack you and force you into doing something.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah, that's a kind of a stereotype that, you know, that the only thing that people do is just sit around and figure out and, you know, how to rape each other all day. And that, you know, and the whole 16 years I was there, I mean, I was aware of a rape that happened one time, you know, in the whole 16 years. And while one is definitely too much, that's not
Yes.
really the point that I'm talking about. I'm just
Mhm.
speaking to
Yeah.
the prevalence. I'm speaking to the prevalence of that taking place.
Yeah. Well, my cousin was in Missouri. He got two stories. One was Missouri, one's in Georgia.
Mm.
So he was in Missouri, and he was doing receipts. So basically,
Yeah.
receipts is you would go to a store that don't have a barcode, right?
Mhm.
Have a barcode. You would get that. You would buy something for like $50 to $100, right?
Mhm.
Then you would go home to your printer and you would make copies of that receipt. And now you would go to the store and you would take, instead of buying the merchandise, you would take the merchandise, put it in a bag, or just go straight to the counter like you have one return this, and they give you the money, they give you the cash back. So he got caught going to the aisle, getting the two items he needed, and going straight to the register. So the guy, pressed him, and immediately he went right to the bus station because he was like, I cannot get arrested out there, man. He said they all were people out there, you know. Then another story is in Georgia. I don't know exactly what he did in Georgia, but he got arrested, 10 years probation. They gave him like 10 years probation, like very very long time probation. He went straight to the bus and came back to New York. So now he don't go nowhere near the South because he don't want to get no police contact because they're not gonna come get him from up here. But if he anywhere down there, Georgia, Atlanta, North Carolina, they might come get him and throw him in jail, and then he got to do that probation that he was on and he skipped out on. That's the two stories I got from my cousin about him like disappearing from South or Midwest because what they do down there.
Well, you know, I have a story real quick that, you know, I remember there was a guy that he was in prison just on a parole violation.
Mm.
So he just had like a year. He had been sent back upstate for like a year, and he he had said that he had said that he actually hid from his parents. He
Mm.
hid from his parents that he even was locked up on the parole violation. So he had them believing that, you know, he was in college, you know, in a state, you know, down south, you know, because he didn't, you know, he felt embarrassed, you know, he felt embarrassed for them to know that, you know, he was back in prison.
Okay. So how close are you with your family now? Did y'all make up for lost time?
Yeah, we did make up for lost time. You know, I was eventually released, just to catch everyone up, your audience here. You know, I was released after 16 years. I mean, I finally was exonerated. I mean, I lost 7 appeals. You know, I got turned down for parole largely because I maintained my innocence rather than expressing remorse and taking responsibility. Eventually, I was exonerated. I got further DNA testing through the DNA data bank, and as I mentioned at the beginning, it did match the actual perpetrator. So my charges were dismissed on actual innocence grounds after 16 years, and you know, the actual perpetrator was subsequently arrested and convicted. As we mentioned, he killed a second person, so that means that, you know, somebody else lost their life as a result of what, you know, what the police did, as a result of what they, you know, did to me. And it was a difficult first 5 years of freedom. You know, they do release you with nothing. You know, so technology was different, cell phones, internet, GPS that hadn't been created before.
Mm-hmm.
Cities and towns looked different. It looked just similar enough to look strange. It felt like I was in a parallel world. You know, I was always passed over for gainful employment. And it was an awkward experience when I would meet up with my extended family because most of them had never come to see me. You know, and the few that did, you know, it was, you know, very few and far between, let's just say.
Mm-hmm.
So it took a while. It took a lot of years actually, but now I feel like I'm in a good place with my, extended family and, even, my brother, but um, I don't feel like a particular closeness necessarily,
Mm.
because I know if something happened, I can't really rely on them, but I do the family thing. Sometimes I make ground just, because I don't know, I guess that's what people are supposed to do, I guess. So, but I know that, I don't feel any guilt or anger or animosity. I did it one time, but I've gotten past that. I know that a lot of people in my extended family, they felt like a collective type of guilt because there were times when my mother made rounds and she was like, "Yo, we got to get Jeff a lawyer," and if everybody could, you know, to contribute like a manageable amount, we could just pool our resources and collectively we can hire a lawyer. And that was always the people always declined to participate in that, and they really didn't help just in terms of on a morale level, just trying to stay in touch. So I know they felt some collective guilt about that. But I think that we're through all of those things now. I've been home 18 years now, and yeah, we're through that. I've finally been home longer than I've been in. I
Mm.
mean, that was the thing. It took a while overcoming the psychological after effects. I mean, I used to see, yeah, I used to see mental health professionals like 4 times a week for like 6 years and dealing the after effects of what happened to me and then just adjust to being free.
You said you left with nothing.
Yes.
How long it took you to get your 41 million, your judgment? It wasn't 41 million. They only gave you 10 million, right?
That's right. Good. You're on the ball, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They only gave
yeah.
you
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it took 5 years before I got anything. I brought a lawsuit in a state law in a court of
mm,
claims, and I also brought a federal civil rights lawsuit. It took 5 years before I got anything from the state court, and then I had 4 defendants. I had City of Westchester, City of Peekskill, County of Westchester. Um, so the Westchester, that was the medical examiner's fraud. They settled with me. City of Peekskill settled with me, and Legal Aid settled with me. I went to trial against Putnam County. I won a jury verdict against them, and that's the last one is where I got they paid the 10 million. Not that I got the 10 million. They
yeah,
paid 10 million because you got to pay your expenses, and
yeah.
the lawyers also take a third. But yeah, that case took a total of like 10 years. So finally, I did get the financial compensation. I used some of it to start the organization, Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice.
It said
Yeah.
they only gave you the 10 million because free trial or something. Like what explain that to me. Like how can they take 30 million dollars away from you, basically, that they owe you,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
you
yeah.
deserve?
All right. So we had what was called so there's a Court of Appeals case that says that the highest amount of money the appeals court could see upholding would be like $1 million per year of incarceration.
Mm,
And just from the Court of Claims and the 3 defendants I mentioned that I settled with, I was
mm,
already close to that. So they were concerned I was going to bankrupt them, right? So they said, "Look,
oh,
we don't want to have to pay. Can you assure us that we won't have to pay more than 10?" And I said, "Yeah, well, I'll assure you of that, but you got to assure me that you're not going to pay less than 6."
mm,
So the jury didn't know that. That's why they came up with the $41 million verdict. But it wasn't that they took it from me. It was that I made the agreement up front. I gave them the assurance they wouldn't have to pay more than a certain amount, and they assured me they wouldn't pay less. But I feel like I got the better end of that because, it's very likely that the judge would have, reduced what I got anyway, possibly to even less than the floor that they were willing to guarantee me.
that was generous of you, because most people would have been like, I want y'all to pay for everything. Like I want y'all to burn.
Yeah, of course, but look, but what would have happened if I would have went the other way on that? Okay, so first of all, they were going to try to get the trial judge to reduce it.
Mm-hmm.
Then they were going to appeal the case once or twice. They would take a couple more chances at reducing it. Meanwhile, I don't have, they would have had a possibility that they would have got the award reduced a couple more times, not for certain,
Yeah.
but possible. And in the meanwhile, I don't have any of the money either. They hold on to the money. So I mean, interest is running on it, but
Yeah.
I still don't have access to it. I don't have usage of it. I can't put that money to work for me. So at least this way, you know, I was finally finished with the case. And believe it or not, it took a, it took some adjusting. I mean, because like when the case was finally finished, like it took like 10 years in all the civil litigation. And that was after the 16 years that I did wrongfully. So it was like, well, for the first time in 26 years, I'm not fighting this case in one form or another. It took a
Okay.
while, it took some adjusting. Mhm.
What are some common misconceptions about people that are being wrongfully convicted?
I think the common misconception is that it doesn't, you know, it doesn't happen that often. You know, as I did, you know, mention the stat a couple of times, which I'll run it out again. I mean, it has happened 3,518 people that have been exonerated, which means they were wrongfully convicted first. So that's one misconception. I think another is, look, while if you were to break it down by the numbers, while it does happen most often in minorities, I mean, it definitely cuts across racial and you know, economic and ethnic boundaries. I think some people think, well, you didn't do that, but you did something else, so you got away with that. So in the end, it all kind of evens out. I think that's kind of a misconception. I mean, I had never been arrested for anything. You know, I never had been arrested even for even just for a violation. I mean, nothing. So, you know, and so I'm kind of an example of that. I wasn't a high school dropout. I was actually on my way to school when I was originally intercepted by the police. You know, so and I really wasn't hanging out with the wrong crowd. You know, I was just hanging out with just other kids. I mean, we did stuff after school that I feel like most people do, right? I mean, we played kickball, we rode bikes, we played Monopoly, we went swimming, we played stickball. I mean, you know, we played tag. I mean, we made up all kind of games that we played. You know, he wasn't in any trouble or anything.
What
Sure.
role do you believe public awareness and education plays in preventing and rectifying wrongful convictions?
So I think that public education in terms of preventing wrongful convictions and correcting plays a significant plays a significant role. In one aspect of it, the more that we can make the general public aware of wrongful conviction, I think the more support that we would have for different policy changes in the law. My organization, others like Right to Remain Silent Coalition, it could happen to you, which I'm part of both those coalitions, and other advocates and groups. I think the more public education there is about the way that the system is broken in terms of wrongful conviction, in terms of parole reform, in terms of mass incarceration and over sentencing, the more, you know, just to name but a few issues, more awareness there is, the more support there'd be for changes. And I think that the more people that make it out, the more people that are exonerated, I think that it makes it a little bit easier for someone else to make it out, because sadly, it's whether you're successful at being exonerated or not, it doesn't turn strictly on the law and the facts like it really should. It turns on whether or not, you know, the judge is going to give it honest consideration, or is it going to be just a knee-jerk rubber stamp denial. And so I think judges are getting more and more aware of wrongful conviction. They're more willing to consider that someone's innocent. They're more willing to consider newly discovered evidence. And so that's really why I love podcasts, you know, and blog talk radio and blogs, and, you know, the explosion of documentary and, you know, docu-series, you know, and there's a lot more, even just regular traditional media channels. So, I mean, you know, all that filters up, and some of that reaches the judges and prosecutors and, you know, the cops. So I think it plays that important role. And I think that prejudicial pretrial publicity also can set the stage for wrongful conviction. You know, I want to mention as we get ready to end in a moment or two that, you know, I was an individual advocate for my first 5 years of freedom. I was speaking across the country and became a weekly columnist, and I was regularly meeting with elected officials. I was trading privacy for awareness, got the scholarship at Mercy College, which is now Mercer University. I finished the bachelor's degree because they cut the funding of that college education for prisoners while I was still incarcerated. Got a master's degree. My thesis is written on wrongful conviction, cause, and reform. Used some of the money. I started the organization. Like I said, we've got 14 people home so far. Working on 13 cases now. We've helped change an aggregate of 9 laws, 3 and then 6 with the coalition. But at some point, I became not satisfied with sitting in the front row. In the courtroom. I wanted to be able to sit at the defense table. I wanted to be able to represent some of the clients, make some of the arguments. So I went to law school and became a lawyer. I have the law license. I have a caseload, and just continuing to live a life that's dedicated to freeing people that in the same position I was in, and working to prevent what happened to me from happening to others through the policy changes. So with that, I have a sense of inner purpose. I have a sense of inner peace. I'm not an angry person. Yeah, I want to enjoy my life as much as I can. I don't think I can do that if be angry or bitter. I feel like I lost so much as is. Why would I want to basically give over the rest of my life? And so I have those lines of reasoning, and I take the vehicle that allows me to actualize that as I take that energy and I channel it into the advocacy work that I do. So this is me, man. And wrongful convictions are more frequent than what most of us believe, and the systemic deficiencies that lead to it are still present now. This could happen to you, right now. So those are some of the uncomfortable truths that we help bring forth today, courtesy of Wide Awoke Media.
Yes, yes.
Thank you for having me on, bro.
Thank you for coming. It's so informational. Only ask you about 2 questions from this list. Everything else is just off the top of the head and us just mingling. Like, I really appreciate it. It was very. I would love to do it again. And like, I still got other questions. Like, I ever
Let's
met
do
the
a
cops?
part 2. Let's
Yeah.
do a part.
Yeah,
Let's do a part 2.
All right.
Reach out to me. We schedule something soon. And yeah, I assume what you have a bunch of questions, or just if it's just a handful.
Yeah, probably a handful. And also,
Yeah, all right.
do you got a documentary out there right now?
Yes, there is. Yes, there's a documentary short. Thank you. There is a documentary short that's out there right now. It's called Conviction, and it's on Amazon Prime. And it's gotten into 17 festivals, and we've gotten 7 awards. So yeah, I definitely have the documentary.
I'll make sure I link that in the description because they need to watch that. Everybody needs to watch that video. Definitely.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on Uncomfortable Podcast with my special guest, Jeffrey Deskovic.
That's right. You did. Yeah, much better. Yeah. Listen, send me the podcast link when it drops. I'll help to promote it. And listen, send me an email. Let's schedule the follow-up. Love to come back on. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate you.
You
Enjoy
too.
the rest of your night.